Hello, everybody. My name is Josh Clare. I'm one of the professors in the PTA program. I wanted to talk just about how do we learn best? How do we learn in the most time efficient manner? What are some of the multiple ways we can learn how to organize and study? And then how do we really become effective with our time? I think that's one of the biggest challenges we're in tough courses and busy, tough programs is just figuring out how to fit in our time to study. So one of the kind of sayings out there in the college course world is that students should be putting in 2 to 3 hours per week per hour in class. So that means if you got a 3 credit class, you're spending 3 hours a week in class, you should be spending 6-ish hours a week or more studying. And that can be really, really hard, especially when you got a class that's 7 hours a week. You've got work, you got family, you got social life. It's the summer and you want to have a little bit of fun. So it can be really tough. So that's what I put together here is just how do we become most efficient with our time. So the first thing I want to say is learning is just about reps, the number of repetitions that you need. It's no more, nothing less. It's just rep after rep after rep sometimes. Now, some classes are high rep classes. Anatomy is a pretty high rep class. I think kinesiology is a high rep class. For me, I know when I was going through my education, my neuro PT was a high rep class for me. It can change person to person, but there are some that are definitely high rep classes, more high rep than others. Some students are high rep, some students, and not necessarily that they have trouble learning, although there are some that do. Um, Sometimes things just don't make sense. Kinesiology for me clicked. It made sense to me. I know others it did not. Flip side of the coin, neuro PT did not click with me. I struggled personally a lot with that. So some students just have a tendency to have things and pick up certain topics easier than others. And even individual topics within classes, week one was a piece of cake, week three was a bear, week four got easy again. Some topics are just easier than others. So we really have to make sure that we understand that some weeks we might have to be putting in more work than other weeks, and we just have to make sure we're dedicating our time for that. I think the topics that are higher rep, I think gait, all of the things you're going to learn about gait is a lot more reps needed than the planes of motion. So just for a little example. Now, one thing I have to say is your mindset. There's a couple of things I want to really change with your mindset. One, it's not the instructor's job for you to learn. And I know that might be hard to hear. Now, fortunately in the PTA and OTA programs, we take great pride as instructors in making sure that our students are learning and really understanding the material and going off to become the best version of themselves as clinicians down the road. But not every instructor in all of your education is going to think like that. So it is your job to learn. It is not the instructor's job to teach you well. It is your job to learn the material. But that's okay. You have your textbooks, you have obviously during class time, and with the internet the way it is, you can find plenty of resources to help you along the way as well. So it is your job to learn. So become an active advocate in your learning. It is your job to learn it. And then another thing that can kind of flip your mindset and when you are trying to study is learn enough so you can teach someone else, not necessarily just to pass an exam or pass a test or whatever it might be. Because if you're learning enough to teach someone else, then you are going to understand the material in a far more in-depth manner than if you're just trying to say, oh my goodness, which question are they going to ask? How are they going to ask this question? Can I get this question right? Skip this because I don't think they're going to ask a lot of questions on that topic. Um, really learn the material enough to teach it. You can teach your goldfish, you can teach your friends, you can teach anybody else. But one of the reasons why I also think that's important is because eventually we're going to be teaching all this stuff to our patients. In some level, we're going to be teaching these concepts to our patients. So we really have to understand it enough to teach someone else. And if you use study groups, that can be really helpful for this process to learn enough so you can teach someone else. Now, here's another concept for us: Bloom's taxonomy of learning. In what we have to do is climb the pyramid. I think when we have easy classes, and even in the high school rank, if we look at this picture here, it's pretty easy to remember something, right? What is the basic? Can you recall the basic fact, right? What year did Columbus sail the ocean blue, right? It's easy to recall that fact. If as we climb the ladder, climbing the pyramid, where we're going to need much more in-depth understanding. And one of the biggest jumps we see for college students is in high school and in low-level college courses. They are really down at the bottom of this pyramid, where we're only really trying to remember, maybe understand. But now when we jump up to our PTA and OTA programs, we're going to be applying the information, we're going to be analyzing, and we're going to be evaluating, creating. So it's a much higher level of testing and knowledge base that we need. We don't need you just to remember the fact. We don't need you just to remember the origin of a certain muscle. We need to really understand why that's important. We need to be able to apply our palpation techniques and to best understand that. We need to be able to analyze gait patterns and analyze whatever movement we're going to talk about. So it takes a lot higher level of learning, and that's one of the biggest jumps that we need to. Now, I will be referring this back again later when we talk about our active study sessions. So just understand that the more we can create during our learning and studying, the higher this pyramid, or the more in-depth we're going to understand what we're talking about. So learning preferences, some people, I am a very concrete learner. Show me if I can create the information in a table, if I can create bullet points, if I can create an outline. I'm very, very rigid in my learning, but not everybody is. Some people just like to listen, and that's how they really understand and learn the best. Some people need to see, that visual type learner. Reading and writing, like I talked about, I'm more of a writing learner. Kinesthetic, where we have to get up and move. I've had students who need to dance a song, dance to a song to remember these things that we're learning. And it's important to understand what your preference is, because then we can gear your studying towards those preferences. But one of the great things about our PT and OT fields is that we need to be able to learn with a mix of all of these styles. We have hands-on exams, we have written exams. We really need to understand the variety of ways and incorporate all of them. Some things like gait is a lot easier to learn in a kinesthetic way, where maybe myotomes and dermatomes that you'll learn later on, maybe it's easier to understand those in a writing way. And if you really enjoy in your listening, that's how you like it best, man, we can record lectures and listen to them on the drive in and drive home, and maybe down to the drive to the beach if you need. So really understanding what your learning preference is, and then trying to gear your studying towards those preferences, although with the understanding that you'll have to do a variety in our PT and OT fields at some point. So here is probably the most important thing I'll be able to teach you: study cycle. And if we can hit these, we're going to increase our number of reps in a really time efficient manner, and we can create the depth of information, the depth of knowledge that you're really going to understand anything that could be asked of you. So first rep is going to preview the material. Second rep, and probably the most important rep, you have to show up to class. You have to go to class. Third rep, review after the class. Fourth rep is an active study session. And then we can also incorporate passive study sessions with that. And then eventually going to assess your learning as well. So preview is, I believe, best done with your textbooks, although some of the instructor material might work. So that's the PowerPoints or that are in Blackboard. Maybe you can just peruse through those. But if you're going to go over chapter 3, pages 35 to 75, go after those pages. That's going to probably really help you the best. And the big reason is because when the instructor created those materials, and thinking back to Bloom's taxonomy pyramid, that's at the highest level, right? So the instructor took that textbook and created this material for you. And it's a summary of all of that textbook material with maybe some more things incorporated with it. But it's all created with the instructor's brain. You have a different brain. The instructor already has a base knowledge that they're creating with this, where they might cut some corners here and there just because they understand something, but maybe the student that's new to the topic might not be. So the textbook really has a rich detail with it, and I'll show you how the best way to do this as well. This preview could be as quick as 5 to 15 minutes, or you can go way more in depth with it. That's going to depend on a handful of factors. One, the student's ability in the course. Again, some courses can be really hard. Some courses are really hard for one student, and then other courses are really easy. So your ability level in that particular class, what is your ability in that? 2, your instructor's ability. I wish everybody was an excellent instructor like me, but that's not always the case. So your instructor's ability can dictate how much in depth of this preview that you need to do. I also will say the instructor's ability, again, I'm a very concrete teacher and learner. Here's the chart, here's the list, here, let's do this in sequence. I'm very kind of rigid in my thinking, where someone who is more artistic and more free flowing, and those learners and my teaching style, sometimes we have a clash where I can't convey the information in a clear way for that type of learner. So that's my poor ability to reach that individual student. That individual student is going to have to spend more time with this preview step than if they meshed well with me. The overall difficulty of the course is going to also dictate. So kinesiology, pretty tough course. The test and measures course that I teach, not very difficult. That's going to be really quick. We can get through that. The other thing is the reality, the time available is going to dictate it as well. I know some academics, professors and people who teach professors, and higher ups just say, oh, just read every single word and understand every single word before class. I understand that life gets in the way, and that there isn't necessarily a time available to do that. So I want to show you the fastest way for that. So again, with our textbook, you're going to have an initial pass. If you're going to cover chapter 2 this week, you should preview chapter 2 before class starts. Your initial pass is just going to be brief. Flip through the pages, look at the big headings, whatever words are in big bold headings. See if you can kind of connect some dots to, oh, I remember that, or there was another class we talked about that. Oh, and maybe it'll just get your mind revving. And any big charts, any big pictures, just kind of flipping through, flip, read, okay, flip, read, flip. Oh, look at that. Oh, okay, I recognize that word. The big thing that you're doing here is when you show up to class, you'll have a preview of what we're going to talk about. That's all we're asking for. It's just like watching a trailer for a movie. It would be really hard to enjoy a movie if we just sat down, had no idea what was it about, don't know if it's a comedy, horror movie, drama, romantic. If we'd had no idea, if we just went in completely unknowing about the movie, it would be really hard to understand. And then about 20, 30, like halfway through the movie, we'd be able to catch on, but we missed all of that information. That's the same exact thing that happens when you show up to class not knowing what's going to be taught. You're trying to process everything all at once, and it's just this big fire hose, and you just can't keep up with it. So initial pass, preview, If you've got an easy class, great instructor, and you're really good at it, just flip through the pages, get a sense of that movie preview that you're going to do. Now, if you need more, second pass, those big headings and subheadings in your chapter, we're going to create little questions about those. And I'll show you what I mean in a second. Now, sometimes that's just enough that you need. Those list of questions, that's perfect, because I'm going to use those and I'm going to pay attention to answering those questions in a minute. If needed, your third pass is to dig in the material and answer all of those questions. But again, if you have time for this, absolutely do it. If it's a tough class and you want to get a great grade or you're struggling, definitely take that step. I think this is the step that is probably the most time consuming, that I think we can catch up with later. But again, your situation is going to vary. So what do I mean by creating questions? So here's a picture of one of the textbooks that I use in my pathophysiology course. So any big heading, I turn into a question. So here's my big heading: dementia, non-Alzheimer's, Lewy bodies, senile dementia, vascular dementia. So my question in my notes is, what is dementia, non-Alzheimer's? Then I'm going to look here, next bold word, etiology. What is the etiology of dementia? Next, signs and symptoms. What are the signs and symptoms? Next, prognosis. So every single bold heading or subheading, I create a question with. Now, if that's all I do, great. I have a list of questions to listen to while I'm in class, pay attention to it, and write the answers to all those questions. If you have time, or if it's a really challenging course for you, go and answer all those questions before class. So again, your mileage is going to vary depending on all of the factors that we've already talked about. Next up, attending class. So if you can attend class with your list of questions, now you know exactly what to pay attention for, the keywords, and you're going to be engaged. So the great trick about not answering those questions is it gives you incentive to keep paying attention during class. How many of you all of a sudden wake up in class and go, oh my goodness, I've been daydreaming for the last 20 minutes. What are we talking about? Well, if you have your list of questions that you got from the textbook and you're trying to answer those questions during class, it gives you a reason to pay attention in class. It gives you a focus to where to direct your attention to. So it can be really helpful if you're having trouble actually paying attention in class. This can give you a little mechanism to help you pay attention in class a little bit more. If you've already answered it, that's okay. Confirm the information you're talking about. You can also clarify confusing information. So if you read and you said, geez, I don't understand the etiology of this dementia, I need to ask a question about this. Or let me sit back and see if this question gets answered. It didn't. Let me ask it now. So you're going to clarify your confusing information for it. And one of the big reasons for this is, one of the other great things about this is we get to pay attention to our instructor tips. So every single teacher you ever have is going to tip their hand, just like in a card game. If you read your opponent playing poker, they're going to tip their hand. Oh, they got a good hand, I'm going to lay off. Oh, no, they're bluffing, I'm going to get them. Instructors have the same thing. We repeat the same thing over and over again. We make sure we try to say things like, hey, pay attention to this. This is going to be on the exam. Although if this is the first time you've been exposed to the material and you're just taking that fire hose of information in at you, you're going to miss all of those tells. So again, knowing what we're about to talk about lets you hear all of those tells. I've had students that have recorded my lectures, and one of them said, hey, Josh, I know which questions are going to be on the exam. Well, tell me more about it. He goes, I've been listening to your lectures over and over again, and I finally figured out when you think something is important, it's going to be on the exam. So I know it's going to say, hey, great, man. If you've listened to me often enough to figure that out, awesome. Good for you. You're going to do great. So we do have them. The better prepared you are going into class, the more you're able to hear all of those. And every single one of us has it. So next is reviewing after class. So where are those now knowledge gaps? Where's the difficult areas of material? And if you could translate that material into your own words, that would be phenomenal, because now you're going to, again, increase your level of understanding. When you put it in your own words, if we think back to that Bloom's taxonomy, repeating words, very low. Creating your own words and your own phrasing for that information, boom, back up to the peak of the pyramid, a real in-depth understanding of that material. Now this reviewing after class can be extensive or brief. It could just be on the ride home. It doesn't have to be formal. You can do things like reorganizing your notes, reorganizing whatever data you have, cluster your information together. Hey, these three things we talked about are very similar. These three are over here. So there's a lot of ways you can do it. Again, it can be extensive or pretty brief. But as long as you can really identify those difficult areas, because those are the areas we're going to want to target when we do have our dedicated study time. So again, extensive or brief, you've got to figure out, depending on your situation, you want to do. So now the active study session. So active study session, we're going to schedule a time for it. If we can put it in our calendar, put it in our phone, set an alarm, whatever it might be, however you get there. Why do you guys show up to class at 3 o'clock when class starts, or whatever time class does start? Well, it's because it's scheduled, right? So same thing, if you schedule a study session, you're more apt to do it. Nope, I can't go out until after 6:30 because my study session starts at 5:30. Whatever that, however it fits into your life, really schedule it and stick to it. Now, most research says 1 hour blocks are most beneficial. However, if you're in a good groove, study more. And if you are struggling, maybe you can take a little bit of a break. Maybe you can't. Maybe the exam's, in 3 days and you just got to grind through that. I don't feel like studying right now. Most research says try to get it around an hour. If you're having fun with the material, blast through that. Just keep going. Now, when we reorganized our information, in that last step, when we reviewed it after class, we figured out what the most difficult information is. That's the stuff we want to start with in this 1 hour block. The reason is because in that 1 hour session, when are we at our best? Closer to the beginning, right? As our time goes on, we get tired, we get frustrated, we're just kind of getting lazy, maybe a little bit. We're just spent, right? And that's okay. Tackle the hardest stuff first. Don't start with page 1. Start with whatever you think is the toughest. Now, in this 1 hour-ish study block, what's your goal? I'm going to learn all about GATE. And then study with focus. In this, what I would suggest you do is create top of the pyramid, create your passive study material. We'll go over passive study material next. And then after you're done, if you got gas in the tank and you say, no, I just want to go for it, right? You don't have to take a break at this 1 hour mark. But if you're feeling tired and you made it, great. Reward yourself with a walk, check on your phone, text some friends, whatever it might be. After all of that, review it again. Do you understand this enough to teach, or do you have to dig back in? Now, active study is that it's pen to paper, it's typing, it's whatever your method is to do all of this. That's what active studying is. Passive studying are what I call travel tasks. So I can study anywhere. I can study in my car while I'm driving. I can study in the line at the coffee shop. I can study while I'm making dinner. I can study when I'm washing up the dishes after dinner. So passive studying are just things that I can do and then incorporate it within my day. So travel tasks, having flashcards on hand. There's apps, Quizlet. I know a lot of my students have loved we could listen or watch recordings either from the instructor, or you can create, again, top of the pyramid, create your own recordings and then re-listen to those over and over again if you need. Create a song to remember all the phases of the gait, create a dance to remember all the phases of the gait, and then watch or listen to that all the time. So however that's going to work for you, you can, if you're studying for 3 minutes in the line at the coffee shop, great. That's 3 minutes less you got to do. And that's where the passive studying, that's where the looking at flashcards is passive studying. It's good, but it's not sitting down and writing those cards out. So that passive study should be something you do all of the time. And that's creating in your active study session, creating these tasks that you can passively study with, just kind of recognition type things. That's how we're going to fill up this 2 hours per hour in class of study where it doesn't hurt, right? So if you've got 20 minutes drive to work and 20 minutes drive home, there's 40 minutes a day where you could just spend studying in a passive way. Again, it's not perfect, but it's something. And it can be really efficient. So this is where we can become really efficient with our time. And feel free, whatever learning style you like the best, your passive studying should reflect this pretty well as well. Now, if you are a flashcard person, one tip I have for you, make both sides a question. So if we can make both sides a question, when we ask our brain to answer a question, it strengthens the memory. It creates a memory faster than if we're not, if we're just recognizing. So make both sides of the flashcards a question. So in this example, what is the medical treatment for dementia? On the other side of the flashcard, the following medical treatments are used for what condition? For people with what condition? And there's all the treatments, the medical treatments. So again, we're asking ourselves questions both ways. We're not just simply reading question, answer, question, answer. No. Flip the cards over. Now we've got question, answer going back the other way. It's going to really make that memory faster. It also gives practice to careful reading, because in this example, there's a lot of other conditions that have similar type of medical treatments, and we're really going to hone in on the differences between this type of dementia and other diseases by careful reading, and that's a good rep to get as well. That's going to help us with our actual test taking. Then assessing your learning. So once you're done with this, hey, let's see if I actually learned this stuff or not. One, the next time in class, you'll either get the answers right or not. But two, we have learning objectives throughout your courses. This PowerPoint, this chapter, here's our learning objectives. A lot of textbooks have study questions in it. So here's the study questions that I have, again, from that pathophysiology book. They have it right there for us. That's wonderful. Some instructors create practice quizzes for you, Quizlets, especially if it's a class that's been going on with the same instructor for a long time. Sometimes you can find previous students' Quizlets, and that's another great way to do it. Your study groups, again, is another great way. If you have a good study, I can't recommend study groups enough. If you have a good study group and we can start quizzing each other, now we're going to be assessing our learning as we do it. And then if somebody gets it wrong, it gives us a chance to actively teach them, which is, again, is up on the high end of that pyramid, and we can then understand our information even more. So after we see our knowledge gaps, we should review that information and then hone in on it more. And hopefully that list of I need to study everything gets smaller and smaller each time we do this, and we get to become really efficient with our time. So if we can do just a few subtle tweaks, preview before class, and then review after class, sit down with your active study session, create some passive materials, and then you can start adding, we can study hours a day without taking up any additional time. The time is there. I know it is. So I've got a couple of test taking tips that I'll review with you really quick. First thing, positive self-talk. Uh, no more of this. I don't know this. I'm so bad. I can't believe I did. No. You've worked hard. You can do this. Think positively about yourself. Limit discussions with others prior to the test. And if you are talking with somebody else, be positive in your conversations with them. It's a nerve-wracking experience to have that test. And especially if someone says, hey, did you study that dementia non-Alzheimer's? That was weird. Well, if you didn't study that, now you're thinking, oh my God, I didn't study that. When really, I'm not going to ask a question on that. Right. So you're riling up your nerves and your negative energy when you don't need to. So limit your discussions with others. And if you do have a discussion with others, just be positive. Hey, we're going to do this. We're going to be great. We're going to go celebrate after. This is going to be fun. And then, focus on one problem at a time. If you answered, there's only one time, and I'll go into that we care about previous questions. Once you'd answered it, move on. Don't linger on it. Even if you got it wrong, even if you did, I asked a question you didn't study at all. That's okay. It's one question. We can still get an A on the exam with not knowing one question. So really just compartmentalize. Okay, question, done. Good or bad, it's over. Focus on the next one. Boom, done. Good or bad, it's over. Next one. And don't let this negative snowball effect where you say, that question number 3 really threw me for a loop. And then I got 4 through 40 wrong after that. Oh, who cares? It was just one question. Other testing strategies, brain dump is a good strategy. So if your instructor allows you to have a blank piece of paper, or if it's on a pencil and paper to test, write down whatever information that you need that you just can't really remember, but you can remember it enough just to jot it down real quick. Maybe it's the cranial nerves was a good one, right? So the mnemonic that I remembered, once one takes the anatomy final, very good vacations are heavenly. So my brain dump before my anatomy exam, boom, I wrote that down. So now if there is a question on cranial nerves, I can just flip back to that and say, oh no, that's cranial nerve 8. Great. Go back and answer it. Great. So my brain dump helped me get that question right. Even though I didn't have a great handle on that material, I could still get it right because I just jotted down the stuff that I had trouble remembering. Pediatric reflexes were it for me when I was going into my board exam. That was one thing I did not, my brain was so full of information that pediatric reflexes were not going in. I knew just enough to have a little brain dump. And you know what? They asked 4 or 5 questions on pediatric reflexes, and I had that little bit of information there. So that can help. Now, if it's an electronic or even if it's not, you can flag questions you're unsure about. This is the only time we're going to go back to a question. And we're going to keep it in the back of our head because sometimes other questions will answer that question. So it might be direct, it might be indirect, where you've never seen, answer D before, but down in question later, you see that answer again and oh, okay, that wasn't it. You can cross that out. So sometimes you learn information from the exam that helps you go back. Now, one thing I will say is when you are reviewing, if you're unsure, do not change your answer after when you're reviewing, unless there's some sort of obvious. All of the following are true, except, and you forgot to read that word, except. If a question answered that question for you, those are the only times you change an answer. Because again, when are you best? At the beginning of the exam. Now, after this exam, your brain is tired. You don't want to do this anymore. You're nervous. You go back through, you start changing answers. I don't think I've ever had a student change an answer from a incorrect answer to a correct answer. I've always seen it. They've changed it from a correct to an incorrect. And I wish they just didn't. So resist changing that unless you reread the question. It's obvious you got it wrong the first time. Now, the other thing is read each question slowly and carefully. When we have our double-sided question flashcards, this gives us reps on that. So take special note of items that include except, not, all of the following is true, except, those kind of things. Really make sure you are understanding to answer the except part of the question. So if you can answer the question prior to reading the answers, man, you've got a really good answer there. Obviously, if you can eliminate answers, great thing about multiple choice exams is the answer's on the page. You just have to circle the right one. So eliminate the obvious incorrect answers. Sometimes if you change the question to a true and false question, and then all the others, the answers are either true or false, that can help you as well. Now, pure blind guessing strategy, narrow down as best as possible. There's got to be at least one of the 4 or 5 answers that you can eliminate. And if you're completely blind, if I have a terrible time learning languages, other languages. So if the test was in Italian for me and I just had to guess an answer, cannot eliminate anything, just blind guess, I'm going to pick the longest and most detailed answer. A lot of the times, us instructors, we work really hard on creating the question, and then we get a little lazy on the answers. So sometimes that longest answer is the correct one. Again, only do that if you have to blindly guess on a multiple choice. So that's it for me. I hope you learned a little bit. I hope you learned how to learn a little bit. My email, jclare, the number 2 at ccri.edu. So if you need any help, reach out to me. That's it. I wish you the best of luck. Bye now.